Hello, Thomas Hallock here, Road Course in American Literature, University of South Florida, St. Petersburg. Today's 3-minute lesson is on coyote trickster tales, specifically in the Pacific Northwest, and I would like to use that to talk about how a literary text takes us into a place and how exploring the place takes you into a literary text. It's not something that you really learn in graduate school, but it's essential to what literature can do. And the question is, how do you find the landscape upon which to hang the idea or the story that you want to tell? The short answer is that, like writing, it's a process. In chapter 4 of A Road Course in American Literature, Coyote and the Kid, I end at Celilo Falls in the Dalles in Oregon. Celilo Falls, it's on the Columbia, and it used to be the most productive fishery in North America, maybe one of, if not the most. And in 1957, it was dammed to form a hydroelectric power plant and Lake Celilo. Absolutely a tragedy. How did I get there? Well, it took a while. To explain, let me talk about how I got there and the different steps. It was basically over 3 different trips. The story began in the year 2006, the bicentennial of the Lewis and Clark expedition, and I proposed to a magazine, I forget, but it was a pretty good placement, that I follow in 2008 the expedition of Lewis and Clark backwards. The funny thing about it is that when I did so, using the guidebook, I found myself in this narrative of trial and triumph, and the guides actually made no sense because I was moving from west to east. And like I said, the maps were all out of order. I kept getting confused. Along the way, also, Julie and I discovered the Nez Perce Trail and the stories of Coyote, which we found to be a much more interesting story, or it had a lot more to say about the land than, surprise to surprise, 2 white guys or an army that passed through, kind of blew through 200 years ago. The Coyote tales instead tell a deep story of the ecology of the place, coyotes' role in shaping the landscape for the arrival of the people. And on the second trip that we took to the Pacific Northwest, again in 2008, we followed the stories and tried to line them up with the physical landscape. How do environment, spirituality, and narrative connect? And yet, something was still missing. And I traveled a 3rd time, this time in the year 2011. My wife, Julie, and I had just become parents. We had just adopted a little boy. And the thing that I learned here is that the Coyote tales aren't simply the story of the literature and the place, but they are stories that are passed down from the parent to the child. So the bond between literature and place is held together by family relationships. That's not anything that I ever would have learned on my own. And I found myself at Celilo Falls, as I relate in a video that I hope you watch on coyote leaving the salmon upstream. It's on my YouTube channel here. I never would have gotten to that point, to that perspective, if I hadn't traveled again and again and again, 3 different times to this landscape. And that's the lesson in today's 3-minute lesson, that like in writing, as in travel, you have to give it several times. You have to have several different drafts. The insight doesn't come in the first time. You have to keep trying to learn. Thank you very much.